everything about his legs and everything. It's just that he's a different player than Kevin Durant was. So who's to say that someone with an Achilles tendon that long, how do we know? What's the book on that recovery? We don't know. So if I'm his agent, to answer your question, I'm saying, hey, if the Nets or the Knicks offer you a huge deal for multiple years and you're okay with living there and being there for that long, you got to take that.
Yeah, I think he's going to have three options. I feel like the Warriors are going to come out and they're going to offer him a 4-year max, and I think he's going to get it from the Knicks and the Nets as well. And then he's got that player option hanging out there. But for him, Eric, I think he's got to decline that and take the money. You take the money at this point, coming off that injury and not knowing and not going out and proving. I mean, what if he comes back and he looks like Boogie Cousins, for God's sake?
That's
the guy coming off an Achilles that has looked awful.
Yep.
85% of this series, he has little spurts where he gives the Warriors something, but he has looked awful in so many situations for this team, and they have no other options at this point. So if I'm his agent, I'm saying, look, let's at least take a 3+1 and get our money. And then maybe you're still in shape when you're 33 or so that you can cash back in one more time. But this 1+1 deals, man, we can't do this because you're one more Achilles tear away from not getting any more money. And teams are going to be super, super sensitive to give you that kind of money, and they're going to want you to prove yourself. So I think it's going to change a lot, Eric. I think free agency, like I said, maybe some of the excitement's off because you start to think about what a team could look like on the court and how they're going to look. But from an intrigue factor and how it's going to affect other guys' mindsets, I think it's going to have an impact. So, Eric, Game 5, the Durant story dominated, but this was a crazy game. So let's run through this here in the last few minutes of the show.
Crazy and bad. Sloppy.
Crazy and some bad and sloppy, especially at the end of this game. But the Warriors have had some great road wins. You think back to the 2016 versus the Thunder with Durant. They were down 3-1. They roared back to win that series. Last year, you had them coming back versus the Rockets, and then you had the win in Game 5 on Monday night. Of those, just kind of in the top of your head, is it too close to say that Game 4 was the gutsiest performance out of this team with everything that they went through that night in Toronto?
Well, boy, this Game 5 to me, obviously what you said earlier is true. Okay, so KD and winning for KD now becomes their rallying cry. And I think you saw that in spurts. But to me, Toronto just plays so physical and so fast all the time that it never really felt like Golden State was in control, even after this rallying cry that I'm sure they felt in the locker room, although a lot of them admitted after the game that it was just really somber in the locker room. So I think they really battled their emotions for most of that game. And I remember texting you, like, to me, there were minutes in that game that it looked like they had resigned themselves to losing this series and going home. I hate to say that because I've had mad respect for what Klay Thompson has done to come back from his thigh injury, and then the minutes that Curry has put in and the activity level that he has had. Although he makes some dumb plays sometimes, it's not for lack of trying because he's been everywhere and done everything he can. And yet I texted you and said, it just, something doesn't feel right to me. It just feels like they're done, like they've given up. And yet we get to 3 minutes left in the game and Klay goes and makes a couple. Curry makes a great one. And, now they're up by 3. And you had the Nick Nurse timeout situation, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a second here. But, then they make a dumb mistake. And then you're thinking, the Raptors have this now. Well, then the Raptors make a dumb mistake. And then Boogie Cousins comes back and makes a dumb mistake. And it was like the last 2 minutes of the game, they were just trading dumb mistakes back and forth. That's why I said it was kind of a sloppy ending to what a lot of people are calling a hard contested good game. But I didn't see it that way at the end. I just saw two teams that were like either A, emotionally, or B, physically exhausted. And they were just trading mistakes back and forth. And it just so happened that the Warriors had 1 point more than the Raptors.
I thought the way this game, you summed it up perfectly because not only did you say it, I texted you when Kawhi went on his run in the fourth quarter and they were up 6. I texted you. I'm like, it's over. And I think I used the OV and a ton of A's. And then Nick Nurse calls a timeout. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Are you trying to lose this series? You have all the momentum right now.
We have too much momentum.
Kawhi is absolutely wrecking the Warriors. They cannot stop him. He's hitting the 3 ball. He's hitting mid-range. He's got the drive going. They have no answers for him. They look absolutely gassed. It looks like he has just ripped their heart out of their chest. They had that double-digit lead, and the Raptors stormed back, and it was like Kawhi was like, it's my turn to just take this game over. Nick Nurse calls a timeout, completely blows the momentum. I think he actually took 2 in a row or something because they came back from break, and then they said, well, it's another timeout. They took this elongated break. The Warriors come out of that, and they completely change up their defense. They start throwing doubles at Kawhi. All of a sudden, the rest of the Raptors are like, well, we don't want the basketball now. This is Kawhi's job. And then the Warriors start getting hot from 3. Boogie Cousins gets goaltendings on both ends, takes 4 points off the board, or 4-point swing. He gets, I don't even know what kind of screen he was setting. It looked like he was getting ready to defecate on the court instead of actually set a screen. I've never seen anybody set a screen like that. Gets called for that. And then Kyle Lowry pulls a long came poly shot and bounces it off the side of the backboard, and the game's over. And I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah. I texted you and said, I think I need to rewatch the last 2.5 minutes of this basketball game just so that I know how to talk about this in an educated way on the podcast, because I feel like I don't know what I just saw.
You had a backcourt violation by the Warriors team inside a minute to go in an elimination game. That Pee-wee basketball players, when you're teaching 4 and 5-year-olds, you talk about that. And they did it in a moment. It was like nobody wanted to win the game at the end.
They did it twice in the last 3 minutes.
It was just, I mean, I was going to ask you, like, did the Warriors win this game? The Raptors lose it? I just think that circumstances fell that the Warriors got their 3 threes. They got the lead. And then it was like nobody really wanted to win the game. It was just mistake after mistake after mistake. And the Warriors didn't make the mistake at the end. It was Toronto. And even then, like, okay, if you're Nick Nurse and you see your team is struggling, you think they're tired and you feel like they need a timeout. I mean, Kyle Lowry always looks tired, but you've got the momentum at that point. And I guarantee you that DeMarcus Cousins and the Warriors were more tired than anybody on Toronto, because at least Toronto's got some depth on that team. And then you call timeout there. Okay. Then with 15 seconds to go and a stoppage in play, and the Warriors are going to go set their defense up, you don't call a timeout then to draw up a play? You know that they're rushing doubles at Kawhi. That's the exact same thing that they do. They're going to force the ball out of his hand, and you don't come up with something better. You just let them play through it, and you get a god-awful shot at the end of the game. I just thought, Eric, it was like nobody in that moment knew. And I think if I'm a fan of the Raptors, I'm very scared and nervous of what I've seen out of this team in Game 7, because it took a crazy shot by Kawhi to beat the Sixers. Last night, you had them on the ropes. You're up 6 at home inside 3 minutes. Your coach starts making dumb mistakes. Your team stops executing, and nobody seems to want to take any big shots in that moment. The Warriors, Eric, they've been there. This is not new to them. They have guys that are willing to take big shots. So back there, this team gets tight. Maybe Kawhi as the robot doesn't, but I think everybody else around him, there's the potential that they could play tight. So if I'm a Toronto fan, I want them to take care of it in Game 6, because coming back in a Game 7 situation where anything can happen, Kawhi's been not 100% himself. He could be one play away from a injury that could put him out for the game, and then you're really cooked at that point. So from an execution standpoint, if I'm a Raptors fan, I am very, very nervous right now about what I saw at the end of Game 5.
Totally agree. And you know what? If I'm Steve Kerr, here's my message to the team. We just overcame a Game 5 where we were emotionally wrecked because we had our best player, or one of our best players, let's just call it their best player, come back, suffer a devastating injury early in the second quarter. And so we essentially played 2.5 quarters of that game with the knowledge. And I texted you and said, when Iggy and Steph went back, when they returned to the bench, Steph still looked emotional and had a towel over his head and still hadn't returned to the floor just yet.
Oh, he was like blank staring.
Yeah. So they knew, right? So they definitely knew. And therefore they played the next 2.5 quarters with the knowledge that Kevin Durant was gone for the season. It was over. That story was done. It had been written, and they were going to have to finish this Raptors season off in the next 2.5 games. There just wasn't any other choice. Well, if I'm Steve Kerr, I go home to Golden State and I say, look, guys, we just overcame one of the hardest games you're ever going to get through. A devastating injury to our player, a back and forth game that was emotionally draining. You guys were all exhausted. You guys all gave everything you had, and we overcame their home court, We overcame Kawhi playing fantastic basketball. We got it back to Golden State just like we had planned. And so now my secondary message to the team is, okay, Kevin Durant's gone, but we have to look at what we did to Portland in the Western Conference Finals. We didn't have Kevin Durant then either. And yet Curry, Thompson, and now Thompson's he's looking well again. So, I think the message has to be, we can win 2 games if we play the way we did against Portland. If we play and finish games with Curry, Thompson, and Draymond giving us what they gave us against Portland, we can do this even without Kevin. I understand that Kevin is a big piece of this, and I feel bad for saying what I said a couple weeks ago that, they could definitely do this without him, because I think we saw that maybe it wasn't so definite, but they can do it. And if you're Curry, that's your only option. Your only option is to rally them around the fact that they did it against Portland. They finished off Houston all without KD. They've got to finish off the Raptors without him. They cannot go into the next 2 games thinking that they're a man down. They have to go into these next 2 games feeling like they can win. And Justin, I'm with you. I believe they can win in Golden State for game 6. And then at that point, it's back to a 3-3 series, essentially 0-0. You flush everything that has happened down the toilet and you say, we are the 3-time world champs in the last 4 years. We got to go out there and play 48 minutes of basketball and win 1 game. I don't care if it's in Toronto. They have one guy, Kawhi Leonard, who's playing great, and other guys that play well in spots. But we have Curry, Thompson, Draymond, Iggy, etc. We can win this 1 game. That's got to be your message.
Yeah, and home court's really meant nothing in this series. So if they can somehow find a way to win game 6, I fully believe they can go in and win a game 7, because the game's going to slow down. Game 7's always slow down. That slow down pace are going to help them with the fact that their rotations have gotten shorter, and the game's going to be more in half court, where their half court offense, I think, functions as well as, if not better than Toronto's. Toronto is really good at times with Kawhi, and at times they get very bogged down because they don't have a lot of shot makers. The problem for the Warriors is a lot of times when they go to that lineup where they're trying to play a big and Draymond, they don't have enough shooting to spread the floor. So I think you need to see more Cook, Curry, Thompson, try to run that lineup out there, especially if they're going to play Van Fleet a lot, because you can have Cook on him, and then you can try to keep your guards out there and stay small and keep more shooting and keep the floor more spread. But Eric, the Toronto Raptors have the depth, and they should win this series. But I just cannot imagine in their last game at Oracle that they're going to lose 3 straight there in the NBA Finals. I'd have to think this Warriors team has more pride than to lose their last 3 in an arena that's been known to be the best home court advantage in the league. Now, Toronto fans would say that they're trying to get there, but in terms of a long-term effect, even if this team wasn't good, they had a good home court crowd. I just can't imagine they're going to go into that arena and drop 3 straight finals games to close that arena out before they move to their new one in Oracle. So I think the Warriors,
they dropped the last 2. I can't believe they didn't at least split.
Believe they couldn't get 1.
Yeah.
So I think from their side, Eric, what we saw when I was frustrated texting you about, the sloppy turnovers from this Warriors team, if they clean those up and they can clean up the defensive side where they can actually get involved and rotate, and they can slow the game down a little bit in the first half, because Toronto keeps trying to push the pace to wear them out. If they can slow down the game a little bit, conserve some energy, don't make stupid turnovers, and actually rotate on defense, I think they can win game 6. And then game 7, it's a free for all at that point.
I'm actually going to say this. I'm going to say they will win game 6 for exact reasons that you said. They're not going to drop 3 straight at Oracle. Now this is not just maybe the last game in Oracle. Now this is the last game in Oracle. It's definite. So I kind of go from what you said and take it a step further. If they do drop this game 6 in Oracle, they deserve to lose the championship at that point. You couldn't win any of the 3 games in your home building, which is one of the best crowds in the NBA especially when the Splash Brothers get it going. So I believe that they will win game 6. And then when they go back to Toronto, I mean, you saw how distraught those fans were. I think those fans kind of felt like game 5 was a moment that they could have closed this out. And now these Toronto fans have to wait as they travel back to Golden State. I bet they expect that this team comes back for game 7.